So tell me about your neighbors. My mother-in-law, Vicky, implores. You see, my mother-in-law, Vicky, and my father-in-law, Billy Graham Worsham, are visiting Austin, Texas to see the house that we've moved into. We've been living in for, I don't know, a year or so. And Vicky loves knowing all about the neighbors. Vicky is a southern gal from Charlotte, and I guarantee you she knows everything about her neighbors. As a matter of fact, she's made them a tomato pie. For a moment, I sit there realizing I don't think I know anything about my neighbors, and I tell her as such. I say, Vicky, I don't really know any of our neighbors. And she says, oh, well, that's a shame. People are just not as neighborly as they used to be. And she gets up to go refill her drink in the kitchen. And as I sit there, I think to myself, you know what? No, I don't know my neighbors' names. I don't know one of their names, but I can tell you, I don't know their names, but I'll tell you, I do know the things that they do that piss me off. There's this one that lives across the street from my house, just right outside of our driveway, just across the street, and they insist on parking directly behind my driveway. So when what could be conceivably just a reverse out of my driveway, put the car into drive, and I'm on my way, because there is a burgundy Honda Civic immediately behind my driveway, now has to be a 4-point turn, causing unknown wear and tear on my vehicle and wasting unknown moments in my life. And then just a couple houses down, there's a neighbor who, my goodness, they're young adults. I don't know how many of them live there. They're young adults, but they still throw parties like they're in college. And I don't know, 4 people live there, 15 people live there. I don't know what kind of tunnel system they have underneath this property. I don't think I'm a very neighborly person. As I'm thinking about this, my wife is sitting across the porch from me, and she sees the gears turning. And she says to me in a way only someone who loves you, like your spouse, can say to you. And oftentimes when she delivers a line to me that is a mix of both honesty and compassion, she does it in a little bit of a soft speak, maybe kind of like a little bit of a baby talk, where she kind of puts her lip out from underneath her chin, and she says to me, "Boo-boo is not neighborly." And I go, "Boo-boo is not." I want to be neighborly. I like Brene Brown. I like the idea of belonging's a good word. I believe this loneliness epidemic is a deal. I believe it to be true. If I were to talk to you, I would say that I think that we all would do better if we had more community. I really do. But for some reason, I can't seem to make myself be interested in the lives of the people. I got enough friends. I don't need to be interested in the lives of the people on my street. I'm not interested in the lives of the people on my street or the happenings or the goings on. I'm not interested. Until one day, a few months ago, I'm walking home from having lunch at a restaurant nearby. And I have in my hand an iced latte that my wife asked me to bring home for her. And as I round the corner to enter onto my street, I got to walk maybe 8 houses down to get to my house. I notice there's this woman who's walking her dog, and it's a shepherd-looking dog with white hair and then a little bit of a caramel coloring. And I don't know that I've met her before, but she's 30 paces. She's to the wall. She's 30 paces ahead of me. But after a moment, she starts looking back at me, and she'll take a couple of steps, and she'll look back at me again. She keeps looking over her shoulder, And I think, am I following too closely? Am I should I give her a little bit more distance? But for the entirety of the time that I'm making my way toward my home, she keeps turning back over her shoulder, looking in my direction. Finally, I get to the walk up where I'm going to turn to walk up to my house, and she's maybe one house down, and she stops, and she turns around, and she marches directly toward me, her dog in tow. And she says, "Do you live here?" I say, "Yeah, I live here." She says, "Do you live here?" As if I didn't tell the truth the first time. I say, "I live there. I live here with my wife. I'm Reagan. My wife is Ellie. We've lived here a couple years." And she says to me, "Okay, Reagan." I say, "Reagan." And she says, "I'm Paula." I say, "Hi, Paula." And I've got this drink that I'm supposed to give to my wife. And all of a sudden, her dog starts licking my knee. And while I'm waiting for Paula to tell me whatever she came to tell me, she finally says, "I need you to come with me. And I need to show you something." And Paula walks right past me back the way that we came, 2 houses down. So I turn and I follow Paula 2 houses down back the way we came. I find myself with Paula at the edge of the driveway of the house that's filled with the young adults who still have parties like they're in college. And Paula says to me, without looking down the driveway, she says, "Reagan, now I need you to walk down to the end of that driveway, and I need you to tell me whether or not you see a body lying there." As I try to make sense of Paula's request, I'm reminded that the street that I live on celebrates Halloween big time. They like Halloween mucho. And there are still people, even though we're flirting with the beginning of December, there are still people who, like they left like a coffin in their yard. Or, there's like one of those 15-foot tall werewolves that sell out at Home Depot, And so I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, this is a mannequin that maybe got left behind and Paula sees it. And maybe that's why Paula kept checking and looking back. I go, "Paula," I say, Halloween's a big deal on the street. I bet you it's just a mannequin that was making its way back to the shed. And Paula said, "Reagan, I need you to make sure." So I walk down this gravel driveway, and the driveway goes probably about 4 or 5 car lengths, and then it dead ends into a fence where where the gate to their backyard is. And then there's a corner that meets the brick of the house. And then there's a crepe myrtle tree that it doesn't have any of the crepe in it. It's just like and there's leaves. It's in December and it's kind of blustery and there's a lot of leaves and it's an overcast day. It's about 2:00 in the afternoon. And as I make my way down this driveway, there's a pile of leaves underneath this crepe myrtle tree, and I notice that there seemed to be some sort of a material like a sweatpant or something like this, and I see what looks to me to be an exposed calf. Now, this is really a really pale, rubbery-looking, plasticky-looking calf. It looks very lifeless. And so I think to myself, you've done it, Sherlock. This is a mannequin. So I look back to Paula. I said, "Paula, it's a mannequin." And Paula says, "I need you to make sure." So I walk a couple of steps further, closer to this figure on the ground. And the wind blows some of the leaves just a tad to where I see a foot. And on the bottom of this foot, I notice calluses. I notice wrinkles. Now, I'm not up to speed with the burgeoning technology that mannequin makers I don't know what's on the frontier right now. But this is a lifelike looking foot. I turned to Paula. I said, it's a foot. And she just goes. So I walk up closer, y'all. I walk up closer, and I notice that there's a black hoodie, and I notice that the hoodie's slightly covering a head. And as I walk around and I get a different view, what I notice is I see some dark curly hair, and I see a nose. And I make out the face of a young woman. And as I take in the scene, I almost forget to announce myself, to say something. So finally I say, hey, no movement. I say, hey, I don't want to touch her. No movement. And I notice that there's an arm. One of her arms is kind of angled up like a saguaro cactus, and I follow the arm up toward the edge of the fence, and what I see is I see this bright red jug of Drano, and it's tipped over on its side, and it's empty. I don't know if this is what it looks like. I don't know what's happened, but I know this person is unresponsive. So I make my way back to Paula. I say, Paula, it's a body. It's a girl. There's some Drano. She's unresponsive. Paula says, go get the people in the house. So I run up to the door. I got this drink, this latte in my hand, and I bang on the door, and all of a sudden I notice there's music going on in the house. And I remember this is the party house, and some guy opens the door, and he's got an apron on, and he's got flour all over the apron, and they're making pancakes. And there's lots of mimosas going on the inside, and they're having a grand old time. And I say, hi, I'm Reagan. That's Paula. We both live on the street. There's a body in your driveway. He goes, what? I said, there's a body in your driveway. And then he goes, oh, it's probably Taylor. I said, tell me more? He goes, well, we had a big night last night. It's probably Taylor. I go, well, Taylor is unresponsive in the driveway. And he goes, as if this is a bothersome thing to him. So he follows me down across their front stoop and down the side stairs, and I point at Taylor, and he sees her, and he goes, yeah, it's Taylor. And I think, can we approach? And so we go up there, and he goes, Taylor, Taylor. And then as he notices that Taylor is not responding, he goes, I hear him go, oh, shit. And he goes, go get somebody else from the house. So I make my way back across the front porch, up the stairs, and I bang on the front door at the house, and someone else opens the door. They have a mimosa in their hand. It's a woman, and she goes, what? And I say, Taylor is in the driveway. Taylor is unresponsive. So she comes down the stairs with me. We go down the stairs, and he's looking at the Drano bottle. He's saying, the Drano bottle says, do not induce vomiting. What do we do? And I said to the girl, I said, are we calling 911? And the girl says to me, go get the other person in the house. I go, Jesus Christ. This is like Abbott and Costello. I go get this other person in the house. I bang on the door. She opens the door and says, what? I say, get your ass out here. Taylor needs you. We get everybody out there, and they finally start manipulating Taylor around, and finally I just hear out of Taylor's, like, deepest recesses of Taylor, I hear Taylor just go, oh. But no, nothing else. They can't get Taylor to wake up. And so the Three Stooges are over here poking and prodding Taylor, for who's been laying here for who knows how long under these leaves. It could have been 1 a.m. And I say, are we dialing 911? I pull out my phone, and they say, wait. I think we're going to dial poison control. I look at Paula. Paula says, 911. I said, I'm dialing 911. And they go, wait, we'll do it. So I see them pick up the phone, and I see them dial 911. I walk back to the edge of the curb, and I say, Paula, what do we do? She says, if they're dialing 911, I think our job is done here. So Paula and I walk back down the street, back toward my house. We arrive at the walk-up where we first met one another. She turns to face me. Her dog licks my knee. And Paula takes a long moment and then says one thing to me. She says, Reagan, I will never forget you. And I say, Paula, I'll never forget you either. And she turns around and she walks down the street to her house. So I charge into my home. I open the door. My wife is probably like, where in the HE double hockey sticks is my iced latte? And I'm like, here is your very lukewarm iced latte, but we need to talk in the front room about what just happened. So we sit in the front room where we have windows of the house across the street, and as I'm explaining to my wife what has just transpired, and she's trying to stomach this latte, all I hope is that I'm going to hear sirens in the next few moments. And thank goodness, just 2 minutes later, we get a proper ambulance, and then we get like the junior ambulance truck, and then we get the fire truck, and then the 2 cop cars, and they're blocking the whole street, and they're dealing with the issue. I see them come out, and I see them load Taylor onto a stretcher, and they start wheeling the stretcher forward, and I see the gentleman who I first met grab the bottle of Drano and hold it in the air and bring it to the EMT, and I think people are finally getting a handle on what's happened here. I see them put Taylor into the ambulance, but then they don't go away yet. The sirens don't turn on. They don't go anywhere. And I look at my wife, who's a nurse, and I say, what does that mean? And she says, well, it could mean that whatever they had to do was so important that they need to do it right here, like right now. It could also mean that she's expired, that she didn't make it. We don't know. I wait for about 10 minutes, and I watch the ambulance finally turn on its sirens and go away. The police stay after a little bit to interview everyone. And as the police go away, I watch the people who were in that home, I don't know if they live there or not, talk in the front yard for a moment, and then walk down the street. No one's getting in a car to go to the hospital where Taylor went. No one's following to make sure Taylor's okay. And I stay in that room for a while wondering where they went, what happened. And 30 minutes later, I see them walk back, and they've got clamshells and plastic forks, and they're eating cake. I don't understand why no one's freaking out about this. So I can't stop thinking about this for the next 36 hours. Now it's Monday morning. I spent the entire weekend looking for obituaries, trying to find, is Taylor in here, looking at the police blotter. What's going on? I'm in that office, that front room on Monday morning. I'm writing in my journal, and I see about 7 a.m. a police car drive up. And the policeman goes and does the back of your hand police knock, that's meant to wake people up in the morning. And I see some woman that's in that house, the tunnels, I don't know, who's in that house, come to the door in a robe, clearly not happy that she was woken up. And the police officer pulls out like a big file, like a packet of papers, and walks through a few of the things of the papers, and then hands it to this girl and goes away. And she stands on the porch for a while, clutching the papers to her chest. And I see her look down one side of the street, and I see her look down the other. And I see her back into the house and turn off the porch light. I didn't know what happened to Taylor. Weeks go by. And I go on a walk with my dog, and I run into Paula, who's out in her front yard. She's got beautiful blue bonnets that start to come in. And I'm talking to Paula, and she says, I don't know what happened either. And next thing we know, a neighbor from across the street who's a woman, but her name is Reagan like me, comes over and says, what was all that hullabaloo with the ambulances? And then her neighbor, Jim, gets into the conversation. And all of a sudden, I start going on these walks. And then next thing we know, Jim's neighbor is Kristen, who's in town from Costa Rica, and she wants to hear the news. And then the neighbor across from there is Joe. That's the neighbor who has the car that I can't back out of my driveway with. And next thing I know, Everyone in the neighborhood is interested in this, and weeks go by. We don't know what's happened to Taylor, but people are interested and people are asking questions, and we've built this conversation around what transpired in our neighborhood. You know, I always thought maybe I should go knock on the door and ask. Maybe I should go and say, is Taylor here? Is Taylor okay? But I don't know. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe I was afraid of the news. And then one day I thought to myself, maybe I'm just not, maybe I'm not neighborly enough. I don't know. Months go by. No idea what happened to Taylor. Until, I can't make this up, today, I walk to go and get coffee. And I'm walking back with an iced coffee down the same street I walked whenever Paula and I first made our acquaintance. And as I'm walking down the street, I always approach that house with the young adults who still throw parties like they're in college, wondering if I'll see through the window, wondering if I'll see someone come out into the front yard, and they never have. But today, as I'm approaching that driveway, there's a fence that separates their driveway from the neighbor's driveway, and I hear some movement on that driveway where I saw Taylor's body. And as I walk past and I catch a view, I see that there is a young man who I've never met before, who's fixing the chain on his bicycle. He gets it fixed and he starts to walk his bicycle down that driveway. And I stop him, and doing my best impersonation of Paula, I say, "Do you live here?" And he says, "Yeah, my name is Miles. I just moved in a few days ago." And I shake his hand. I say, "Hey, Miles, I'm Reagan. I just live in the blue house right over that way." And I say, "Miles, I don't know if this girl lives in this house. I don't know what the story is, but there was a girl named Taylor who I found in this driveway a couple of months ago, and I don't know what's happened to her. Is she okay?" And Miles looks at the ground and he says, "Yeah, I heard she had a pretty rough go. I heard she had a pretty rough go. I heard that the drinking got to her. I heard that she resorted to some pretty bad stuff." And then he says to me, "But she's sober now." And I say, "She's alive?" And he says, "Yeah, she lives in the house." And I say, "I'm so glad to hear that." And Miles looks at me and he says, "Yeah, man." He says, "You know, that was pretty neighborly of you." So I walk home and I'm hanging out on the back porch. I'm doing a little bit of writing. I'm doing some emails. And I go to pull some weeds in my backyard whenever I can't get the focus that I need to get. And I hear our next door neighbor who just moved in last week. We just got new neighbors next door. I hear someone in the backyard rustling around. And I don't know about you, but you know, if you used to be unneighborly like me, I'm not talking to them. But I think maybe I'll do my best, was it Wilson from Home Improvement impression? Maybe I'll just go hidey-ho over that fence to see how they're doing. So I look over the fence and I see on the deck this woman holding her baby. And I find her name is Jillian. And they've got a 9-month-old. And Jillian and I exchange a few pleasantries. And I find that Jillian is a Southern girl from Kentucky. And so after we chat a little bit, Jillian says to me, "Tell me about the neighbors." And so I say to her, "Jillian, let me tell you, you got Paula 2 houses down over this way. And then across the street from her is Jim. You got Kristen, you got Joe, and in the house, 2 houses down and across the street, the one that throws the parties that are way too loud, there's a new guy there named Miles, and there's a girl named Taylor. Thank you.